Tashdil everyone, I'm Sakina Butt and welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly feature in English that tells you about this week's news on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's look at the headlines first. US mayors call on His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Dharamshala. CTA President lauds Japan's support for Tibetan cause. UN experts call on China to release Tashi Wangchuk. Hold China accountable, international rights groups urge UN member states. 6 Tibetan political prisoners profiled at 10th Geneva Summit for Human Rights. Tibet at the United Nations, week-long advocacy at the UN Geneva conclude. On Wednesday last week, Mayor Greg Fisher of Louisville, Kentucky and Tom Tate of Anaheim, California, called on Tibetan spiritual leader His Holiness the Dalai Lama at his official residence in Dharamshala. Mayor Greg Fisher tweeted, "It was an honor to speak with the Dalai Lama, an iconic figure for peace, justice and compassion, about the tremendous compassion work happening in Louisville." His Holiness was invited as keynote speaker at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, a summit of 200 mayors dedicated to building more compassionate communities in 2016. In 2011, Louisville adopted the name City of Compassion and Anaheim declared itself as City of Kindness. Both cities have been led a parallel movement on promoting human kindness and compassion, a cause championed by His Holiness. On Wednesday last week, CTA President Dr. Lobsang Singye gave an exclusive interview to Sakura Yoshiko, a veteran journalist and head of think tank Japan Institute of National Fundamentals, on her program for Genron TV. During the interviews, Dr. Singye spoke about the Chinese government's repression in Tibet and threat to Tibetan culture and religion, results of destruction of Tibet's natural environment on billions of people depending for water from major rivers originating from the Tibetan plateau, why the international should back the non-violent struggle for the Tibetan people, middle way approach of the Central Tibetan Administration, and the selection process of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's reincarnation. Dr. Singye also lauded Japan's support for Tibetan people's non-violent struggle for freedom, human rights and democracy in a packed auditorium in Japan's Osaka city. Dr. Singye reiterated Xi Jinping's proclamation in the last 19th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party to usher socialism with Chinese characteristics in the new era that will strengthen one-party rule and pose grave threat to democracy and freedom. Nagao Takashi, Member of Parliament from the ruling Liberal Democratic Party and Secretary of the All-Party Japanese Parliamentary Support Group for Tibet, said, "Japan has the largest number of parliamentarians supporting the issue of Tibet and called for the need to give concrete support for Tibetans to achieve genuine autonomy through the middle way approach." The event was organized by Fire Under the Snow organization. On Wednesday last week, a group of UN human rights experts expressed concern over Tibetan language rights advocate Tashi Wangchuk and called on China to release him immediately. The experts called on China to drop all the allegations against his comments featured in an article and video documentary in the New York Times. They notified the Chinese authorities to respect and uphold the right of persons belonging to minorities to use and promote their own culture and languages without restrictions and without fear of reprisals or criminalization. On Monday this week, the UN Human Rights Council opened its 37th regular session in Geneva, Switzerland. A group of international human rights organizations has sent a private letter to specific UN member states urging them to hold China accountable at the UN Human Rights Council. In the letter, the group specified 5 cases of human rights defenders, including the case of Tibetan language rights advocate Tashi Wangchuk. On Tuesday last week, a group of political prisoners around the world have been highlighted at the 10th Geneva Summit for Human Rights and Democracy, with posters of political prisoners raised at the conference venue. The posters of around 35 political prisoners depicted the number of days that each political prisoner have remained imprisoned or disappeared. 6 Tibetan political prisoners were profiled among the 35. Tibet's 11th Panchen Lama, Gedun Chukyi Nyima, was profiled as one of the longest-serving political prisoners in the world, being wrongfully imprisoned for 8,315 days. Gedun went missing on 14 May 1995 at the age of 6 after His Holiness the Dalai Lama recognized him as the reincarnation of the 10th Panchen Lama. Since then, Gedun Chukyi Nyima and his parents have not been heard of. The Chinese authorities have admitted taking him but have not revealed any information about his whereabouts. On Friday last week, a week-long Tibet advocacy at the United Nations undertaken by DIIR and Tibet Bureau, Geneva, to highlight the deteriorating human rights situation in Tibet wrapped up successfully. In lead up to the 37th regular UN Human Rights Council session and other upcoming reviews of China's human rights record within the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mechanism, a 2-member delegation from DIIR was headed by Secretary Sonam Norbu Thakpo and supported by Office of Tibet, Geneva. In the view of dismal human rights situation in Tibet and China's continued violations in rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and failure in the implementation of provisions entailing the cultural and linguistic rights of Tibetans, the delegates called foreign missions and UN human rights officials for a consistent attention on the human rights situation in Tibet. The delegates also urged the missions to effectively engage with China in the upcoming Human Rights Council session. So much for this week. See you next time and have a great weekend.